Hello, you're listening to an interview with Catholic Vote Political Director Josh Mercer from episode 25 of the Catholic Vote Radio Hour. Like and subscribe to the Catholic Vote Radio Hour on YouTube, iTunes, and Google Play, and follow us at Catholic Vote on Facebook and Twitter. I'm your host, Stephen Harriott. And now the time has come for our weekly political discussion with Catholic Vote Political Director Josh Mercer. How are you, Josh?
Well, I'm doing okay. Was hoping that we'd have better news out of Pennsylvania this week, though.
That's exactly right. And my gosh, was that close. I was up all night looking at the results. What happened there? It was within literally a few dozen individual people, wasn't it? That close?
It does appear that the margin of victory here is going to be within just a couple hundred votes here between the two candidates. And unfortunately, pro-life candidate Rick Saccone is going to probably end up losing this very close election to pro-abortion, so-called Catholic Conor Lamb, and it's deeply frustrating.
Yeah, it sounds like a truism, but it shouldn't now. People should keep in mind every vote does count, and no one knew how close it would be, and in any given election, you don't know if it could come down to that small of a number, and if you and your 10 friends who you drive to the polls might make the difference.
Right, and in fact, what's going on in this race, it's an absolute case where turnout was the difference, because liberal voters are so angry at every single thing the Trump administration stands for that I'm joking about this, but they would almost walk on shards of broken glass in order to go out and vote and cast a ballot that would in any way be a thumb in the nose to President Trump. So that's their method here. And unfortunately, a lot of pro-life voters, conservative voters are not getting the message that every election counts. You need to vote. Look, Stephen, you know from past experience that presidential elections, people tend to vote in larger numbers. I mean, that's just sort of obvious. Right. You know, the presidency involves the most important stuff. And midterm elections, or in this case, which was a special election, you don't get as much turnout. Well, the Democrats and the liberal voters were absolutely fired up. 79%. They got 79% of the voters on the Democratic side to go out and vote in this election compared to the presidential election in 2016. I mean, so right. That doesn't sound like a lot, right? That means 1 out of 5 didn't end up voting. No. That's a really good number when it comes to a special election. On the conservative, pro-life Republican side, only 53%. Okay.
Right.
And so how in the world does a pro-life Republican lose an election in a district that went for Trump by 20 points? Well, it's because pro-life and conservative voters just did not come out to the polls in anywhere near the numbers and intensity.
And there are a number of people I want to blame. No, I do have some thoughts, though. And we had a great piece from Amber Athey, who's a star at the Daily Caller, but she's also a columnist at Catholic Vote. She just published a piece with us this morning. The title is "The Media Lied to Voters by Telling Them Conor Lamb is Pro-Life." What was up with that, Josh? I mean, I saw Fox News and tons of conservative pundits repeating the lie that Conor Lamb was pro-life when he's not at all pro-life. And that must have hurt the election, especially how close it was. It seems to me likely that some good people could have been tricked into this because they thought, oh, he's a pro-lifer and he's a pro-Second Amendment military guy. Yeah, sure, I'll vote for him. Sounds almost like a Republican from days of yore.
Well, here's the question to think about, Stephen. You got a 33-year-old candidate who looks into the camera, says, I can't stand Nancy Pelosi. I'm not going to support her. And he's shown shooting an AR-15 gun.
Right.
He says, I'm a Marine. I'm a prosecutor. I believe in our values here in southwestern Pennsylvania, whatever. And voters are like, oh, this guy sounds pretty darn conservative. And then people say, oh, he's pro-gun, pro-life. He was not pro-life at all. He would say, well, I'm personally opposed. I mean, you've heard that garbage line before.
Tim Kaine was pro-life in that sense.
That's such a baloney. I mean, as a lot of pro-lifers have made note, that's like saying you're personally opposed to rape, but you won't do anything about it. It's an absolute canard. You cannot be, I mean, if you really are against abortion, you should try to curtail it. And they would just say, oh, devout Catholic, he's pro-life, all this garbage. Former Governor Ed Rendell, he's a Democrat, of course, he gets on Fox News and he's like, oh yeah, he's pro-gun, pro-life. And the Fox anchor had apparently no clue on Conor Lamb's record. Conor Lamb had said in the debates that he supported legal abortion left and right. a reporter from the Weekly Standard came up to him and said, would you support a ban on abortions after 20 weeks? He said, no, I don't want that. I want to keep it the way it is. So this is what's going on, Stephen.
Right.
The pro-abortion lobby has such a tight grip on the Democratic Party that when you look all over the land, all the Democrats who are running for office, almost every last one, except for Dan Lipinski in Illinois, has promised and pledged their allegiance to the abortion lobby. They will not be in favor of any regulations or cutbacks, keep the subsidies to Planned Parenthood rolling. And it's gotten to be quite crazy. In fact, the reporters and congressional pundits are like, usually in some of these more rural districts, the Democrats running will say they're pro-life or even adopt a few pro-life positions. But the new script from Conor Lamb is like, who cares? Just hold a gun and everyone will think you're conservative and they'll think you're pro-life and it won't matter. And then you can still collect checks or contributions for people who are totally pro-abortion. And I'm afraid that this playbook is going to be copied left and right all across the country.
And speaking of all across the country, one thing that's really important here, because you and I are both pro-lifers, and the pro-life position is of such moral weight that we tend to give it a really high premium when we're looking at politicians, to the point where we would oppose Conor Lamb, but also to the point where we would support a man like Dan Lipinski. Dan Lipinski is a pro-life Catholic who's a Democrat.
That's right.
And Conor Lamb happened to be a Democrat, but he's radically, he would defend abortion up to partial birth abortion. So that's why we opposed him for the most part. And it's really getting sad because I think a lot of good Catholics are getting harassed year after year after year for being supposedly partisan. You're just a right winger. You're just pro-birth. You know that line. Right. You don't really care about people because you're not for universal health care. You're not for a minimum wage hike and da-da-da-da-da-da. You're just opposed to abortion, but you don't really mean it, or you would do more to help people. Well, here we are, the day after we, broke our necks to try to defeat Conor Lamb. We're trying to elect Dan Lipinski for his pro-life views and his consistent pro-life voting record, despite the fact that he's a Democrat. And the whole pro-life movement is rallying around this guy Lipinski. It's kind of heartwarming, isn't it?
Here's the thing that drives me up the wall. Yes, I do like the fact that there's a lot of pro-life groups, Catholic Vote, Susan B. Anthony List, that are working their tails off to try to help Dan Lipinski because he's a rock-solid pro-life Democrat. He's voted pro-life 43 times since he got into Congress in 2005. And so he's been there for us. We're going to be there for him.
And as a side note, he's totally wrong about economics. I don't like his economics. I don't like his, I disagree with him about all kinds of stuff. But it's not going to keep me from donating to his campaign or whatever, personally.
That's right.
Supporting him.
I don't think you're going to get anybody out of the south side of Chicago that you're going to agree with on economics. But the question is, do you want someone representing the 3rd District who's a cheerleader for the abortion lobby like Marie Newman, or do you want someone who's rock solid like Dan Lipinski? And obviously that's why we're going to the mat for Dan. But, you're saying, isn't it kind of neat that the pro-life movement is willing to be truly bipartisan? Like, we're trying to do everything we can to stop Conor Lamb. Unfortunately, we came a little bit short. Well, that's just because you're pro-Republican. Well, then why are we supporting Dan Lipinski? Because he's a Democrat. Right. He's totally pro-life. But here's the other thing I think we really need to focus on right now. And you alluded to it a little bit where you said there's a lot of Democrats who are Catholic who hear the moral language that's used on abortion and they want to apply that to the welfare state or guns or whatever else. And people can have honest disagreements about which guns should be legal. And it is a moral issue. Don't get me wrong. I just think that the question about whether or not we should kill our children is the paramount moral issue of our time. I don't mind talking about moral issues about guns or the environment or whatever, but I don't ever equate, hey, should we make guns age 18 for age limit or should it be 21? There's no way I would consider that on the same par about whether or not you could kill a baby. That's a monstrosity. Just because we allow it in our country doesn't mean it's normal. It's an abhorrent evil, and we need to combat it. But my biggest thing from this is that there's a lot of Catholic liberals who know abortion is totally wrong, and they feel so much guilt about their political party supporting this 100% at taxpayer expense that they've got the guilty conscience thing going, which we Catholics, we know about, right? But here's what gets it. They reserve their anger for Catholics who vote Republican instead of the people in the Democratic Party who have made it pro-abortion. And I think they've got their priorities all wrong. And their true enemy is not that Catholics would vote Republican because of pro-life issues. their real culprit in their mind should be this litmus test in the Democratic Party that you have to be totally pro-abortion in order to be a member of the Democratic Party, to get fundraising money, to run for office and all that other kind of stuff. And so that's what I think we need to be focused on. Why is it that if you want to run in today's Democratic Party, you have to totally support abortion? Why is it if you want to get fundraising, you have to support abortion? And this guilty conscience eats away at them, and they lash out at Republicans. The Catholic liberals who say the Catholics shouldn't vote Republican because the Republican Party is bad on ABC all the way down to Z. Well, wait a minute now. Where are these Catholic liberals right now? Are they out there supporting Dan Lipinski? Are they donating to his campaign? Are they volunteering? Because you know what? I see Susan B. Anthony list and us here at Catholic Vote trying to help out Dan Lipinski, but I sure as heck don't hear Catholic liberals out there. Like, where are these Catholic liberals who keep saying, oh, torture, welfare, healthcare, all this other stuff? When it comes to abortion, they don't want to talk about it. Right. And you know what? Their silence right now is deafening.
Yeah, it is. It is. That's exactly right. And here's, in the moral hierarchy of priorities, what we're talking about is, get your own house in order, and we will help you get it in order. Because basically, before you can have the moral authority to talk to us about the welfare state and gun control, you need to get this wild, extremist abortion agenda out of the Democratic Party. Then we can talk. It's not the other way around, where we have to get everything but abortion right before you listen to us on abortion. It's this way.
Yes, and I think you make a great point that we're willing to work with them to help them clean their house. And one of the ways that we're trying to do that is to help Dan Lipinski.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Dan Lipinski, God bless him, hopefully his work and his championing of the unborn will rub off on future generations of liberals. And we're going to see more people running for office in the Democratic Party and saying, look, I don't care how much you attack me and how much the Democratic donors hate my guts. I'm at least going to make a showing. I'm at least going to show up. I've got to. That's hopeful.
Well, we are facing the prospect of the extinction of the pro-life Democrat movement if they don't get their act together. And right now, this month, we have Dan Lipinski. And
he's their opportunity.
He's in the race of life right now, and so we need to go out there and help him out.
That's right. Excellent. Well, there's a lot to deal with. Man alive, it's so heavy. There are so many morally important things to be paying attention to, praying about, acting on, and donating about this week. And I hope our listeners do get involved and call offices and see how they can get involved, All right. Now, one last thing. Josh, please point our listeners to where they can keep up to date on these things in the next week.
Yeah, I just subscribe to The Loop. It's our free daily briefing. Go to CatholicVote.org/loop and sign up for free.
All right. Thanks, Josh. I'll talk to you again next week.
All right. Bye.
Well, thanks for listening to this interview from episode 25 of the Catholic Vote Radio Hour. Again, you can like and subscribe to the Catholic Vote Radio Hour on YouTube, iTunes, and Google Play, and don't miss the rest of this episode coming out Friday. I'm your host, Stephen Harriet.